23 unpaid parking tickets, total $3,450. Judge Frank Caprio adjusts his glasses and looks up at the woman in the witness chair. White hair, folded hands, a cane resting quietly beside her. Miss Walsh, do you own this vehicle? She lifts her head slowly. No, Your Honor, I'm blind. I haven't driven since 1999. The courtroom freezes. Judge Caprio leans forward, his tone softening but sharpened with disbelief. You're telling me you are legally blind? Yes, Your Honor. Diabetic retinopathy. I lost my sight at 60. I couldn't drive even if I wanted to. He glanced down at the citation list, then back at the prosecution. Rhode Island plate, HDR 8473, he reads aloud. You're certain you've never owned that vehicle? I never heard of it until 3 days ago. A quiet tension settles over the courtroom. Caprio turned toward the parking authority director, Brian Foster. Mid-40s, crisp suit, confident posture, the image of someone who trusts paperwork more than people. Mr. Foster, help this court understand something. How does a blind 86-year-old woman accumulate 23 parking violations across Providence in just 18 months? Foster opened his folder, still confident. Your Honor, our system shows the vehicle registered in her name, her address, her driver's license number. Everything matches. Every ticket was issued properly. Caprio didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Are you telling me your system is more trustworthy than the woman sitting before me with a white cane? The courtroom sits in absolute silence. Before we go any deeper into this shocking case, tell me where you're watching from in the comments and share this video so more people can see what happens next. You're watching Case Closed, where justice meets truth no matter who tries to hide it. Foster shifted. The computer records don't lie, Your Honor. The plate is registered to her. Mr. Foster, has anyone in your office physically verified that this woman owns a car? We process thousands of tickets monthly. We rely on DMV registration data. Judge Caprio looked at Margaret Walsh. Her hands trembled slightly. She faced forward, eyes unfocused, posture rigid. Miss Walsh, when did you last hold a driver's license? 1999, Your Honor. When my doctor told me I couldn't see well enough to drive, I turned it in. I got a non-driver ID instead, and you've renewed that non-driver ID every 10 years. The last time was 2020. The judge made a note. So for 26 years, the state has known you don't drive. Yes, sir. He turned back to Foster. Your system says she owns a car. The state says she doesn't drive. Who's lying? Your Honor, I'm not saying anyone's lying. I'm saying our records show. Your records show an impossibility, Mr. Foster. That's what they show. Foster's jaw tightened. I can only speak to what's in the system. Then your system is broken. A woman stood up in the gallery. Mid-50s, glasses, nervous energy. Your Honor, may I speak? Balaif Rodriguez stepped forward. State your name for the record. Patricia Chen, I'm Margaret's neighbor. Judge Caprio gestured. Approach. Patricia walked to the stand. Her voice was clear but shaking. Your Honor, Margaret and I have lived next door to each other for 11 years. She's blind. She doesn't own a car. She uses a cane and relies on her daughter or me to drive her to appointments. How did she find out about these tickets? I found them 3 days ago. Margaret asked me to check her mail because she was expecting a prescription delivery. I found 23 envelopes from the parking authority, all unopened. She can't read them. The judge looked at Margaret. You didn't know these tickets existed? No, Your Honor. Patricia read them to me. That's when we came here. Judge Caprio leaned back. Balaif Rodriguez, pull the DMV records for plate HDR 8473. Right now. Rodriguez left the courtroom. The judge addressed Foster again. Mr. Foster, these tickets, different locations, different times, downtown Providence, the east side, Federal Hill, some are 30 minutes apart. You're telling me an 86-year-old blind woman is joy riding across the city? Your Honor, I'm telling you what the data says. The data is wrong. Respectfully, Your Honor, the data is verified through the DMV. If there's fraud, that's a DMV issue, not a parking authority issue. So, you're absolved because you trust a computer. We have to trust the system. And common sense? Where does that fit in your system? Foster didn't answer. Bail Rodriguez returned holding a file. He handed it to the judge. Judge Caprio opened it. His face hardened. Miss Walsh, this record shows you have a non-driver identification card. Issued in 1999, renewed in 2009, renewed again in 2020. No driver's license on file. He looked up at Foster. Mr. Foster, your system says Margaret Walsh owns 3 vehicles, not 1, 3. A Honda Civic, a Ford F-150, and a Nissan Altima. She can't see a stop sign, but according to you, she owns a truck. The courtroom stirred. Foster stood. Your Honor, if the DMV has incorrect records, if there's no if here, this woman is blind. She has been blind for over 2 decades. The state has documented proof. Yet your office has been mailing her tickets for violations she couldn't possibly commit. What happens next in your process, Mr. Foster? When she doesn't pay? Foster hesitated. The fines escalate. Eventually, the case goes to collections. Collections. So a blind woman on a fixed income gets sent to collections for crimes she didn't commit because your system can't cross-check a non-driver ID. We don't have a protocol for that. You don't have a protocol for common sense. The courtroom door opened. A woman in a blazer walked in carrying a briefcase. She approached the bench. Your Honor, I'm Lisa Martinez, fraud investigator with the Rhode Island DMV. I was contacted an hour ago about this case. Judge Caprio gestured to the witness stand. Miss Martinez, you're here because this isn't the first time we've seen this, Your Honor. It's the first time someone brought it to court. The room went still. Martinez opened her briefcase. 3 months ago, we started tracking irregularities in vehicle registrations tied to elderly residents. The pattern was always the same. Non-drivers, elderly individuals, suddenly showing new car registrations they never applied for. How many cases so far? 147. The number landed like a hammer. Judge Caprio's voice stayed level. 147 people. Yes, Your Honor. All elderly, many blind, in nursing homes, or deceased. Margaret Walsh gasped. Patricia Chen gripped the edge of the bench. Judge Caprio set his pen down. Deceased? Yes, Your Honor. We found 12 registrations under the names of people who had been dead for over a year, and the DMV issued these registrations. They were entered into the system by a DMV employee, Kevin Torres. He's been with the department for 8 years. He had access to non-driver ID records. He used those records to create fake registrations and sold them to individuals with suspended licenses or no legal right to drive. Sold them? Yes, Your Honor. For $2,500 per registration, buyers got a clean plate. Torres pocketed the money. The tickets went to people who couldn't read them or fight them. Every ticket these criminals earned was mailed to someone too blind or too dead to read it. Judge Caprio turned to Foster. Mr. Foster, you've been mailing fines to dead people. Foster's face went pale. We had no way of knowing. You had every way of knowing. You could have asked. You could have checked. You could have questioned why an 86-year-old blind woman suddenly owns 3 cars. Martinez continued, We've identified 71 total tickets linked to the fake registrations under Margaret Walsh's name. 23 are in Providence. The others are in Cranston, Warwick, and Puckett. 71 tickets, yes, Your Honor, totaling $14,200 across all jurisdictions. Margaret Walsh made a sound, a small broken gasp. Judge Caprio looked at her. Ms. Walsh, did you know about the other tickets? No, Your Honor. He turned back to Martinez. How much money did Torres make based on the 147 fake registrations over 18 months? Approximately $367,500. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Caprio raised a hand. Silence returned. And the victims, mostly elderly, 12 deceased, 31 in nursing homes, 54 with disabilities like Miss Walsh, The remaining 50 were older adults living alone. Have any of them been sent to collections? Martinez's voice dropped. 48 of them. Some have had wages or Social Security garnished. Judge Caprio closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his gaze was sharp. Your entire system turned the elderly into scapegoats. Your Honor, Martinez said, we only discovered the scope 3 weeks ago. Torres covered his tracks well. He spaced out the registrations, used different addresses, made it look random. What broke it open? A daughter in Cranston Rust, her father, who's been in a memory care facility for 4 years, suddenly owed $11,000 in parking fines. She hired a lawyer. The lawyer contacted us. Judge Caprio looked at Patricia Chin. And you, Miss Chin, you opened your neighbor's mail. 146 others might sleep without fear tonight. If you believe DMV should verify elderly IDs before tickets reach collections, hit subscribe to Case Closed so more people see this story. Martinez pulled out a sheet. Your Honor, I have a partial list of victims. May I read it into the record? Go ahead. Harold Preston, 92 years old, 89 tickets, $13,000 in fines. Social Security garnished for 16 months before his daughter found out. Margaret Walsh's hand went to her mouth. Denise Lau, 78, blind from glaucoma, 14 tickets, $2,100, sent to collections, credit score destroyed. Eleanor Vasquez, 84, deceased 2 years before the first ticket was issued in her name. Her son only found out when he tried to settle her estate and discovered a lien. Judge Caprio's knuckles whitened on the bench and no one checked. Martinez met his eyes. Not until today, Your Honor. He turned to Foster. Mr. Foster, did the parking authority review any of these cases manually? Foster's voice was tight. We don't have the staff to manually review every ticket. I didn't ask about every ticket. I asked about the ones that don't make sense. An 86-year-old woman with 23 tickets, a dead woman with 17. Did anyone stop and ask why? The system flags unpaid fines, not demographics. That's the problem. Judge Caprio looked at Martinez. Where's Torres now? In custody. He was arrested this morning after we traced the payments back to offshore accounts. And the people who bought these registrations were working with state police to identify them. Some used cash, others used prepaid cards. It's going to take time. Miss Martinez, these victims, how many have been notified? We started notifications yesterday. It's going to take weeks. Weeks. Judge Caprio's voice was quiet. Dangerous. Some of these people have been living in fear for months. Collections calling, credit ruined, and you need weeks. Your Honor, we're a small unit. We're doing everything we can. He nodded slowly. I believe you, but the system that allowed this, how small is that? No one answered. Judge Caprio looked at Margaret Walsh. Miss Walsh, do you understand what happened here? Someone used my name to register cars I don't own. That's correct. And those cars racked up 71 parking tickets. The people driving those cars knew exactly what they were doing. They knew the tickets wouldn't come to them. They knew you couldn't fight back. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why me? Because you were easy. You're elderly. You're blind. You live alone. To them you were invisible. Patricia Chin spoke up. She's not invisible to me. Judge Caprio nodded. Which is why we're here. He turned to Brian Foster. Mr. Foster, what safeguards does the parking authority have to prevent this from happening again? Foster hesitated. We're reviewing our protocols. Reviewing? That's not an answer, Your Honor. We rely on the DMV for accurate registration data. If their data is compromised, you're passing the blame. I'm stating the reality of our operations. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Here's a new reality, Mr. Foster. Automation without oversight isn't efficiency. It's negligence. Your office sent an 86-year-old blind woman to the brink of collections because no one bothered to ask a simple question. Does this make sense? Foster said nothing. I asked you a question, Mr. Foster. No, Your Honor, it doesn't make sense. Then why did it happen? Because we trusted the system and the system failed. Who takes responsibility for that? Foster's voice cracked slightly. We do. Judge Caprio sat back. He looked at the ceiling, then at the papers in front of him, then at Margaret Walsh, who sat perfectly still, hands folded, face toward a voice she couldn't see. 5 seconds, 7, 10, 12. I've heard enough. The courtroom inhaled. All 23 citations against Margaret Walsh are dismissed immediately. The parking authority will issue a written exoneration and place an identity fraud flag on her record. Effective today, Miss Martinez, your office will coordinate with credit bureaus to restore Miss Walsh's credit standing and remove any record of these violations from all databases. Yes, Your Honor. Furthermore, I'm placing the following recommendations on the record for the Rhode Island Department of Motor Vehicles and all municipal parking authorities in this state. He looked directly at Foster and Martinez. 1. The DMV must implement mandatory in-person or live video verification for all vehicle registrations. No exceptions. If someone can't appear in person, the state goes to them. 2. Any registration request tied to a non-driver ID triggers an automatic fraud alert and secondary review. 3. Parking authorities must verify vehicle ownership independently before sending any case to collections. A cross-check with non-driver ID records is not optional. 4. The state will send annual letters to all residents over 70 listing any vehicles registered in their name. If they don't own a vehicle, they check a box and mail it back. Simple. These are recommendations, not orders. I can't legislate from this bench, but I can make sure every word of this hearing is public record, and I can make sure people know what happened here. He turned to Margaret Walsh. Miss Walsh, you're free to go. You own nothing. The state owes you an apology. It can never fully give. Her voice shook. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me. Thank Miss Chen. She's the one who cared enough to read your mail. Patricia Chen wiped her eyes. Judge Caprio looked at Martinez. What's the next step for Torres? He'll be arraigned tomorrow. The charges include identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. The Attorney General is pursuing the maximum sentence. Good. Make sure I get a copy of that outcome. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Caprio closed the file in front of him. One question saved 100 lives. How does a blind woman get a parking ticket? That question should have been asked 18 months ago. It should have been asked by the DMV, by the parking authority, by anyone who saw the name Margaret Walsh next to 23 violations. But it wasn't. So, a neighbor asked it instead. He looked at the gallery, at the reporters, at the few people who had come to watch. This case is closed, but the conversation isn't. The gavel came down. 4 months later, Kevin Torres pleads guilty to all charges. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in state prison, no parole eligibility for 7. The state issued refunds to all 147 victims. A compensation fund was created for those whose credit had been destroyed or whose Social Security had been garnished. Legislation passed requiring in-person verification for vehicle registrations tied to non-driver IDs. But 23 of the victims had died before the fraud was uncovered. Their families received apologies and compensation, but not justice. Margaret Walsh became an advocate for elder identity protection. She testified before the state legislature, saying that trust is something you don't need eyes to lose. Judge Frank Caprio kept one of her tickets framed in his office. Next to it, he hung her white cane, a gift she gave him after the hearing. The placard beneath it reads, "Ask the question." Patricia Chen still checks Margaret's mail every day, not because she has to, because she cares. Brian Foster resigned from the parking authority. 6 weeks after the hearing, the new director implemented manual review protocols for all high-volume violators and cross-checks with state disability records. Lisa Martinez was promoted to lead a statewide elder fraud task force. She carries a photo of Margaret Walsh in her briefcase, a reminder that data without humanity is just numbers. And Margaret Walsh. She still lives in the same tiny house she's lived in for decades. She still leans on her neighbors to help her get to appointments. She still renews her non-driver ID every 10 years because she hasn't sat behind a steering wheel since the 90s. And now, when the mail arrives, someone sits beside her, opens each envelope, and reads every line aloud. Not because she's helpless, not because she's forgotten, but because finally someone sees her. Someone sees the years she worked. Someone sees the life she built. Someone sees the truth behind the paperwork that tried to bury her. And cases like this force us to confront a harder question. Is 12 years enough for a DMV worker who stole 147 identities, including one from an elderly blind woman who never deserved any of this? Tell us what you think down in the comments. Your voice matters here. You're watching Case Closed, where we honor the legacy Judge Frank Caprio left behind. Justice with compassion, accountability with humanity, and the courage to see people, not just paperwork. Before you go, hit subscribe to Case Closed and share this video with someone you love and tell us. Comment, where are you watching from? So stories like this never disappear into silence.